evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, the case of Mohammed and Aisha. Our very special guest this evening, Lionheart, a Christian preacher who engages in open-air debates, dialogues, and evangelism on 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. For information on his ministry, visit his website, truthdefenders.com. Louis, what an honor to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And for obvious reasons, viewer discretion is advised for this particular episode. And we are discussing the case of Mohammed and Aisha. I want to play a little clip of something that transpired with Louis with some of the Muslims he was debating and engaging on 3rd Street Promenade recently. Before we play the clip, introduce the case to us of Mohammed and Aisha. You are an expert in Islamic texts and theology.
Well, this is a very sensitive topic. Obviously, it deals with the sexual relations between an adult and a child within a world religion, and that being the religion of Islam. Obviously, there are over 1.5 billion followers of Muhammad, and so to speak of this very sensitive issue is to bring forth criticism and sometimes anger and even violence.
And Louis, why I wanted to have this program is this is hardly ever done, if ever done. You don't see this on, CNN does an hour special on it, or MSNBC does a special. You never see this discussed. And I find when I bring it up or when you bring it up, we've had our own experiences. But let's put it this way: the responses are, usually angry or there's denial. But for instance, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian. I don't have a problem when somebody says something's in Matthew or something's in Luke.
Right.
What do you?
Yeah, we have no issues with a Muslim or non-Muslim or non-Christian quoting from the New Testament. Mm-hmm. There are no moral taboos within Christendom. Mm-hmm. Anything that is considered a sin in the Bible, it is shown as a sin. Mm-hmm. Anything that is considered something universal as an applicable teaching for the Christian is in clear context. There are no questions about the morality within the New Testament or the Old Testament concerning sexual relations between a man and a woman, men and men, women and women. These things are clearly laid out in the New Testament and in the Old, so that there are no gray areas. We know within the pages of the New Testament that an adult ought not to engage in relations with the child.
And why this is so important is it's not just two quote-unquote Islamophobes sitting around trying to quote-unquote slander the Prophet of Islam. Muhammad is considered a moral example to be followed by many Muslims, and so this is a crucial thing for us to discuss and analyze, and this is something that Louis hasn't created or other people have just created out of thin air. This is a fact that's documented in Islamic theology. And before we discuss the Islamic theological teachings and evidence of what transpired between Mohammed and Aisha, let's show a little clip of an exchange that occurred between Louis and some Muslims on 3rd Street.
But I will answer those questions. You see, it's the unfortunate ignorance of people like this young lady that cause them to have animosity towards the Christian faith, because they do not criticize the biblical revelation of Christianity. What they do is they criticize their misunderstanding of the Christian faith. So their ignorance, ma'am, right now you're violating the law. Don't touch my property. Can you call?
Don't be assaulted. Don't be assaulted.
You're going to end up in jail, ma'am.
I would love to. In the name of Allah, we'll end up in jail. Don't sit here.
Muhammad was a pedophile. He was a liar, a thief, a murderer. Nothing other. Well, good thing I have a hard head. So, it's okay for her to insult my Lord. It's okay to insult my Lord, but it's not okay to insult that filthy pedophile Muhammad, who molested a 9-year-old little girl by the name of Aisha. He was in his 50s, she was 9 years old. So that's okay for a pedophile to lead you into savage rage? That's the religion of peace, folks. A piece of you here, a piece of you there, but it ain't no peace, I'll tell you that much.
Wow, that was some I could say pretty powerful stuff. Let me ask you this. Why did you say what you said, and what ended up happening with that lady?
Well, as I've stated before, the lady came up. She started asking a lot of questions. She had already engaged us apart from the mic, so I already knew she had some antagonism. When she came to the microphone, she fired off about 17 questions and comments. When I asked her about which questions she wanted answered first, she just said all of them. So then I just figured she's not really interested in a true intellectual dialogue. That brought her over around to my section of the street where I perform. It's not really a performance, it's open air dialogues and debate and preaching. And she grabbed my Bible, which is private property. I told her not to touch it. She said that was okay. I said that she would get arrested because it is private property. With that, she said, by Allah, I'll get arrested. And then she mentioned Mohammed. Well, the first thing that came to my mind was Mohammed and Aisha, so I just said Mohammed was a pedophile. I should have given a little more context. That was in the heat of the moment, but there was no time for the context. She pulled back and engaged me with her fist.
Okay, so Louis, a lot of people's first instinct when they watch this is, oh, this guy, this preacher down on 3rd Street, he's provocational, he's insulting the Prophet, etc., etc. But you're stating a fact, and the fact is rooted in Islamic theology. So let us begin. Aisha is recorded in Islamic texts as having been married to Muhammad at the age of 6, and the marriage was consummated at 9.
Correct.
Tell us what happened and some of the teachings, because this is in the Hadith and Bukhari, etc.
Yeah, this comes from Sunni primary source materials, although Shiites wouldn't disagree with these texts in some instances. The narrative is that Abu Bakr, Muhammad's companion, had the daughter Aisha. Muhammad approached Abu Bakr and asked for her hand in marriage. He said that it was inappropriate. He said, how can you ask this of me, seeing that we are brothers? Muhammad said, we are brothers in faith, in the religion, but she is lawful unto me. How Abu Bakr, as a father, a loving father, protecting his children, would allow for that to proceed any further is beyond any ethical reasoning. But he did hand over his daughter eventually. Aisha was 6 years old when they were engaged. She had a sickness that caused her hair to fall off. That is why I think Muhammad did wait 3 years before he engaged her in consummating the marriage. But there are scholars that have given fatwas or judicial edicts declaring that between the ages of 6 and 9, Muhammad did molest her. It's called the practice of thawing, and I apologize to your audience in advance. Some of the terminology
we've said viewer discretion.
Offensive.
Viewer discretion advised. But thawing is, and sorry, we're not trying to engage in pornographic conversation here, but it's the placing of the male's penis between
her thighs.
Right.
And this would just prepare her for that ultimate penetration.
And she's between 6 and 9.
Between 6 and 9.
But this is in Islamic teachings and fatwas.
Yes, you could go to Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 5, and find these teachings in there, numerous narrations.
Okay, now, so Louis, this is in Islamic teachings. This is what is accepted in Islam, and through my own readings, for instance, in Bukhari 6130, Aisha is actually talking about that she was playing with her dolls when the marriage was being arranged and ensued. And during the marriage, this was during the marriage, but she was actually playing on a swing with her friends, it says, when Muhammad first approached and wanted to marry her. So this is obviously a child.
Yeah, the culture of the time, it implies that if the child has not yet reached puberty, she's still allowed to play with her dolls. Mm-hmm. The fact that it states that she was playing with her dolls shows us that culturally, it was before her period. She was prepubescent.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if I'm going to play the devil's advocate or just say what many argue, but there are Muslims that come forward, or some apologists, and say, hey, look, this was in some ways culturally accepted to a certain point at that time, because there didn't seem to be any great opposition or criticism of Muhammad for doing this.
Yeah,
Was this a standard practice in Arabia at the time?
I have not received any information that verifies that claim. But even if that is true, now for the past 17 years, I have been asking for both Christians and Muslims that say it's a cultural norm, and that is why Muhammad allowed it, to provide the proofs from archaeology, from history, from any source that would verify that it was a cultural norm at the time for adults to engage in marriage or sexual relations with children. I've yet to see that information. Now, if that it was the case, Muhammad, claiming to come in line of the prophets of the Old and New Testament, should have known that God has always told his people not to engage in the practices of the nations around them. Mm-hmm. So that being a cultural norm, he shouldn't have gotten his morality from the culture, but from the God of Israel.
It's so interesting you say that, Louis, because I often think of that as well. There's a double standard here, because some of the Muslims that I speak with and have debated this with, they always say how the culture in Arabia and religious practices were so bad and Muhammad wanted to fix them. But then they say, oh, but with Aisha it was the culture of the time. Right. So they believe in cultural relativism, but at the same time they don't believe in it because Muhammad had to fix cultures that were bad. Right. There's a contradiction there. Right?
There is. It's a very serious contradiction. But Muslims that will object to these hadiths, even though they're already sahih, they're authentic, the 9 volumes said by Bukhari, and 7 volumes said by Muslim. Even though these are narrations of the traditions and the practices of Muhammad by his family members and his close companions, the Quran in Surah 65:4, it clearly states that a Muslim man can engage with a child that's prepubescent in sexual relations to consummate a marriage, or to seal a relation concerning the it could be, they can say that it's part of the culture to seal a relationship with another tribe. But Abu Bakr, remember, objected to Muhammad.
Why would he object, right?
And Abu Bakr said, we are brothers.
Right.
If they're already companions as brothers in the religion, what need was there for a consummation of a marriage between his daughter and Muhammad? It doesn't make sense.
And it also shows, even the fact that he objected, it shows that there was a consciousness in terms of this being wrong. Louis, let me ask you this. In Islamic theology, it appears that Aisha was Muhammad's favorite wife.
Yes.
And the other wives were complaining. Now, the Quran commands husbands to treat their wives equally in chapter 4, verse 3. But Muhammad clearly violated that.
Yes.
The same verse also forbids husbands to marry more than 4 women, and Muhammad received a revelation granting him immunity from this law in chapter 33:50. What's going on here that Muhammad's not following the Quran in terms of how to treat wives and how many he can have?
Right. In fact, Muhammad took his daughter-in-law as a bride. One of his wives said to Muhammad, she was amazed how Allah was quick to please his messenger. She knew that Muhammad was getting special revelations that were exemptions to what he had already commanded his followers, like the 4-wife rule. Also concerning battles in Mecca within the place of the Kaaba. There are numerous examples of Muhammad getting special revelations that exempt him from what he had already commanded his followers.
Sounds a little bit convenient.
Yeah, it does.
Louis, now speaking of revelations, because there are some Muslims, and I heard some of them on the street that you debate with, they say, no, but Allah said it was okay in terms of Aisha. But Louis, let's stress something here. Let's say it was a cultural norm at the time, hypothetically. Let's say God said it, Allah said it was okay. We know through empirical reality and evidence that the United Nations, for instance, did a report on this. It actually endangers a little girl's life when intercourse is forced upon her. Right. There's psychological damage, there's mental damage, but there's also physical damage to a little girl who's not ready for intercourse. And girls lose their lives. They are maimed for life in terms of this. How do we integrate this with what Allah wants?
Well,
if He's a loving God.
Right. Well, the Quran never says that He is a loving God. In fact, He says that He does not love the disbelievers. Mm-hmm. The only people He loves are those that He calls His slaves that submit to Him ultimately. And it's not an intimate love. It's a relationship between a slave and a master. So I don't know how you can call that love in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, the psychology and the physical damage that is done to a child that is taken to the marriage bed of an adult male is detrimental. It is a lifelong psychological damage. The relationships that young child will have further on in life will be tainted by that example that is performed on her because of Muhammad's example, or by the actions performed on her because of Muhammad's example. Muhammad is considered a beautiful pattern of conduct for the Muslim. The Sunnah, the life and practice of Muhammad, is what the Islamic community is to be regulated by, is to emulate Muhammad's life. So Sharia law, Islamic law, is based on the life and practice of Muhammad in every area of life.
Okay, and so
for 1,400 years, we've had young children, infants even. I believe it's the Ayatollah Khomeini's Little Green Book that states that an adult male can engage in sexual relations with a child as young as an infant.
Well, he married a 10-year-old girl when he was 28. And so why we're raising this also, ladies and gentlemen, is the problem here is that Muhammad is considered a moral example to follow. And so there is a pattern of Muslims taking child brides because of this example set by Muhammad. So this is extremely relevant to this day because it's the abuse of little girls.
Yeah, and it's a taboo in the West. You see, the Muslims that recorded these things didn't consider it a taboo at the time. I understand that, but they weren't presupposing that Christians would come along later and ask for an answer to these things. That they would be questioned at a moral level. In other words, if Muhammad came, as I stated earlier, Muhammad's claim that he comes in the line of Moses, the line of Jesus, the line of the prophets. Why is there such a diametrical difference between the morals of Muhammad and the morals of Moses or of Jesus? There is no biblical example that can justify Muhammad's actions with a child.
Right, and Louis, what I want to end with is how Muslims deal with this issue. Because, for instance, just this last Saturday when I was down there, one Muslim that was yelling at you, you asked him how old was Aisha when Muhammad married her, and he goes, 17. Right. And then you joke, you with your sense of humor, you said, come on, come on, come on, and then you showed him that you knew the text, and then he finally goes, okay, she was 6 or 7, and then he came up with all the other excuses. What is the psychology here where they actually lie to us when we bring it up initially?
That is actually a very good indicator that their moral conscience is superior to their prophets, because they cannot possibly conceive of an adult having sexual relations with a child. They see it as a taboo, or they see it as something to be hidden. If it was such a great thing, such a good moral example, there would be no shame in it. God does not give us commandments that we're to be ashamed of. So their response should be an indicator to them that maybe they need to reevaluate the claim of Muhammad's prophethood in light of his moral actions.
Louis, I'm sorry, our time is up, under 30 seconds. How do you conclude on the case of Mohammed and Aisha? What is the meaning?
Well, the ultimate conclusion is this. Muhammad violated clear biblical commandments that we ought to protect children, that we ought to uphold others above ourselves. Taking a child into the marriage bed that damages her physically, spiritually, and psychologically is not to consider that child above yourself. Muhammad was not a good moral, spiritual, religious leader. He left a legacy of death, a legacy of pain, a legacy of destruction. And a Muslim needs to reevaluate if it is his religious background concerning his family background, his family's religion, he needs to rethink it for himself and not let his culture, his family, his friends, or any kind of coercion influence what he is going to take to the grave with him. Reconsider your worldview in light of all the available evidence and make an intelligent decision to follow whom you claim you're going to follow.
Louis Lionheart, thank you for your brave and courageous truth-telling. It was an honor to have you here.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. And we will see you next week. Good night.